Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Family Show, the very awesome Family Show, Season 3, Episode number 10. And with me today, I have Robert Pardi. He is a life coach, and he does the podcast, which is, hold on a minute, I got to pull it up here. Make sure I have it.
I could jump in. It's called Possibility in Action.
Possibility in Action, and you have it on Buzzsprout, and I'll put that across the bottom of the screen here so people can pull it up. And you do 5 minute little sessions on there, and you were talking to me a little bit before that you got it because of you get little pieces. Where did the Stockholm one come from? Where did that come out of?
Wow, that's really interesting because the Stockholm one came from one day I was down here in my office, and I was just thinking about like people being closed in, right? Because it was a cold day, it was dark, and somehow it just made me think of like being in a cell or being in a basement, even though I have a lot of light in my house. And the Stockholm Syndrome came to my mind about how sometimes we keep ourselves captive. And so that's where that came from. A lot of times
captive in a mindset that can harm us, or captive in a mindset that is negative. At least for me, that's what I've kind of dealt with. And is that kind of things that you've dealt with before?
That's exactly it. I had a rather tough childhood, which in a way created a lot of limiting beliefs. And I slowly worked to get rid of those limiting beliefs. Then I was confronted with a pretty big life challenge, and I realized that some of them immediately came back to the forefront in a really difficult situation. That's one of the reasons why I actually became a life coach. Part of the desire to become a life coach was also to learn strategies for myself. And then from there, now I help clients.
Okay. Right. And what would you say some of the most difficult issues there are to deal with when you have your clients?
Well, I deal regardless of who I deal with. Usually the key difficulties most people have are trying to go with the flow in life. So there's this big need to try to control, and there's a lot of things we can't control. We know that now, of course, with COVID. So there's this idea of needing to control, and underneath needing control is because we have expectations of the way we think things should be. And after that, like we just talked about, the idea of limiting beliefs. And part of the problem about limiting beliefs are it's very hard not to fall into a type of victim mindset. And part of that is because our brain is actually wired to focus on the negativity. And it's focused on the negativity actually to protect us. But we can create a story around that negativity that stops us from seeing all the opportunities and all the possibility. What I talk about all the time with my clients is, at the end of the day, and a lot of my clients tend to be caregivers, but at the end of the day, we really have only two perspectives to take in our life: obligation or opportunity. And when we feel that we have to fight against life, when we feel resistance, it comes from being in the mindset of obligation, of needing to do things. When we're in the opportunity mindset, we're going with the flow, and we're looking for ways to grow or to thrive. And we see all the reason I call my podcast Possibility in Action is actually, I ask my clients always to come up with their own hashtag. And I did this exercise years and years ago, and my hashtag I came up with personally is possibility in action, that I want to constantly be in action to open myself to all possibilities. Doesn't mean everything works out, of course not, because that's life. But when you move from a limiting mindset to more of a growth mindset, that's when you realize that everything does have an opportunity. It's very hard for a lot of people to hear, especially when they're going through something negative. They're like, where is the opportunity in this? But if you pull back to see how you can grow, how you can benefit, you see how strong you are as well. A lot of times what these situations present is they show us how capable we really are. Like, a lot of people think when they read stories about somebody being resilient, right? They're like, oh, wow, that's so amazing. That person's so resilient, or they're extraordinary. And I hate that word, because extraordinary gives us an excuse not to try, because we think, oh, that was extraordinary. But if you think about any time you've said to yourself, I just can't take one more thing, and then you have, that's resilience.
Right.
You are extraordinary in that moment. You just have to learn how to access it on like at will.
Right. And then once you can do that, you can change things in your life, or once you're able to do that.
Yeah, for sure. The thing about changing things in our life is, once you move your mindset, and it's not easy. When I talk about, like, if we use possibility in action or whatever we want to say, these are philosophies. These aren't something that we can study from a book and we say, oh, that makes sense. It's something that needs to be honed daily. And so when you make that shift, then you're not sitting there thinking that things are happening to you or life is happening to you. You make life happen for you. And so that's how I see the shift. I think I may have lost you. The counter is still going, though.
And sorry, my connection keeps dropping out, and I get frozen sometimes. So,
okay.
I kind of wanted to know also about when you start changing your life, if you can take your habits and habit form into good things, is that a good way to deal with things?
Well, exactly. If I could give just a little background, so some people understand. I was an investment banker in New York. Had a great job. Got a job in the Middle East. But during that period of time, my wife, who was studying an MD PhD, wound up being diagnosed with late-stage breast cancer, and she passed away 11 years from the day she was diagnosed. And we decided together, and that's what made me transform into a life coach, because of actually, in a way, becoming her impromptu life coach. But we decided to look at our different habits, because everything we do, every way we react to something is a habit. The way we view life is a habit. Our perspective is a habit. And there's a difference between, and a lot of psychologists talk about this. Viktor Frankl talked about this in his book, A Man's Search for Meaning. But there's a cue, and then there's the response. And in the middle is a space. What we have to learn how to do, and the way you change habits, is you make the cue create a different reaction by having that space to redefine the reaction. And I was just talking to a client about this the other day, that the idea of what if, that's a habit. Oh my God, what if I fail? What if I ask this person out and they say no? We can change the habit that we have, the what if habit,
Right.
to if then, being if I fail, then I will. And we become proactive instead of becoming reactive. And that's where we'll find our own personal power.
Okay. And then when you find your own personal power, how then do you take that and use it for how do you use that for bettering yourself in life? Like me personally, like I'm having to start to change my diet because I found out that I'm pre-diabetic. So now I got to change my eating habits, and I got to change my exercise habits and all that kind of stuff. So how do you use that personal betterment to start changing those things?
Okay, excellent question, because in the changing of the habit, now you understand you have your personal power, right? So let's say we've stepped into that circle, and we're starting to think of the if then, or we're starting to be active in our life instead of passive. You need to question yourself. You have to change your diet. Are you angry about it? Is it something you're saying, damn, I used to really like, those Twinkies, and now I'm not allowed to have them?
Right.
Or are you saying, wow, I learned I can't eat Twinkies because they could hurt me, so now I'm going to choose a different course of action for myself? And so the idea about personal power is it allows you to talk to yourself differently. And like I said, it doesn't happen overnight, because these are our habits. These are ways we talk to ourselves that we picked up when we were children. Theoretically, or scientifically, not theoretically, our personality forms between the ages of 7 and 13 and really doesn't change unless we proactively change the way our personality is developing, because our personality comes from our perspective. And so what I'm trying to say here is that once you become more active in your life, then you need to start to say to yourself, okay, I am going to do this because, and look for the benefits of what you're doing, not what you're giving up. Because when you're looking at what you're giving up, you're looking at lack. When you're looking at what you're gaining, then you're looking at abundance. And that's what motivates you, because there's
gaining more life by changing my diet and exercising is way more abundance than not eating a Twinkie anymore.
Exactly. And we all fall off the wagon and stuff like that whenever we change, when we change habits. And we have that's another point, that you have to be patient with yourself. We are so hard on ourselves that we have to sort of do everything perfectly. But this idea of perfection is actually a scapegoat, because nothing can ever be perfect. And perfection actually petrifies your life, because it doesn't allow you to change, because you're always looking for something to be 100% correct. And then I know, so when we fall off the wagon, we eat that Twinkie, our brain starts spiraling. I screwed it up. I'm so bad. But no, I'm human. I ate the Twinkie, but I know that I have the strength within me to then get back on. And that's where, when you start to look at the gains instead of the losses, you also connect to the idea of gratitude in that moment, because you not eating the Twinkie, you're grateful that you found out you shouldn't eat the Twinkie because you want to have more years.
Yep.
You want to enjoy what you're doing, right? So, but again,
Yep.
I'm very selective with who I work with because of the way I've also designed my life. But what I explain to people is, I said, the idea of a coach, I'm not there to fix anything. A coach is not there to fix, and a coach is not there to give you the answers. The coach, if you think
to
of,
point out what you need to change,
to show you inside yourself that you already know everything. It's just removing all the crap that has been blocking you. You know, if you think of the different people in the world today, right? You have an influencer, which is basically trying to manipulate you to do something. Then you have a motivator, which is great because rah, you feel so good. And then 3 or 4 days later, you don't have that energy anymore. But what you need is somebody to teach you how to empower yourself. Because at some point in time, you shouldn't need a coach anymore. Or maybe you see the coach once a month instead of once a week or whatever. But a coach's job is not to keep the client.
Right. Coach's job is to get you to move on to the next thing. And so are there other clients that you started working with and you're like, oh man, I gotta go through the basic mechanics of everything, and then from there I can start working on the rest of it, and they turned into like somebody that could look completely different and acted completely different than when you started with them?
Yeah, I'll say that one, you know, the basic mechanics, in a way, I don't believe there's such a thing, because we're all so unique that some people are way advanced on some things and maybe not on the others, but it's not that anyone is missing anything. But there is always that point of transformation. Now, there's some radical transformation where people leave a job or something like that. I've experienced that as well. But the real transformation that people walk away from, even though they might, come to a coach because they want to reach an objective, but as they're doing the work, all of a sudden, the way they approach life changes, and the objective is not as important as the journey. And that's what's the most amazing thing is, because it's even like if you buy a new car, you're thrilled to death for like a week. It smells good, you're driving your new car. Then maybe 3 months later, you know what? It's just a car.
Right.
It doesn't have that fulfilling essence anymore. And in a way, that's the same thing as an objective, because really where the excitement comes from is reaching the objective. And I have found that, or it's something I truly believe, we are really here just to evolve. And evolution means changing. It doesn't mean that all of a sudden we all become Supermen or whatever the case is, but it means that we're here to learn about ourselves. And I say this all the time whenever I'm working with anyone or on podcasts or something. What we are is nothing more than a content creator. The more we learn about ourselves, the more content we have to give to other people. And when we're not here anymore, which is very important to understand, that we're not meant to survive life. There's just no way around it, right? So that we wind up our lives have an impact on someone else. And it doesn't have to be, a lot of people focus on this word purpose, and they think we all have to be Greta saving the environment. And that's not it at all.
That might be her.
That's exactly. That's her purpose.
And right.
Yeah. But for us, it can.
I was going to say, as somebody that's recently found faith and all that kind of stuff, I kind of want to circle back to where you said, nobody's perfect and all that kind of stuff. I think that goes along with if you're religious at all, like any sins that you're worried about committing or committed or whatever. It's the same thing. Is you're not meant to be perfect. Jesus was supposed to be the perfect one, and you're supposed to keep trying to strive to be like him, but you're gonna have issues and you're gonna fall off the wagon.
Right. But such an important thing is that, and it fluctuates between comparison and admiration, because if you're looking from the religious point of view, Jesus, for example, is someone to be admired, right? It's a symbol of moving forward. He's a symbol.
Yep.
When we compare and we fall short, then we beat ourselves up. But when we sit there in admiration and say, my journey is to try to improve every day. Mm-hmm. The issue we have, especially as Americans, I think, is we are such a great society because we're dreamers and we think big and we achieve so much. Yep. But we never like, if you really read someone's story, they didn't become, Elon Musk didn't build Tesla overnight. They were small steps. And it's very interesting because Toyota became the number one.
You only hear about that big step at the end. You don't see all the times where he was up all night worried about making payroll because he was, whatever amount short. That kind of stuff that you never see.
Right. Or maybe he suffers from insomnia, or we don't know what's behind it, right? And so that's again that whole thing of extraordinary. But the interesting thing is, and what I wanted to say is, Toyota became the number one car manufacturer in the the 60s, 70s. I can't remember when it was, after the Second World War, because an American taught Toyota the concept, what they call Kaizen. And Kaizen is just improving small steps. That's it, just by small steps. And that will lead to something big. But when we want change in our lives, we become a little impatient as well, right? We want exactly. And we want to take that big leap. And it just, none of those things can really happen overnight because it's not organic. Those types of big leaps, if you think about evolution, just from an evolution point of view, the fish, the frog, the monkey, whatever that case was, it didn't happen just overnight. When there was a big change, it was catastrophic because the system couldn't handle it. The ecosystem couldn't handle it.
I can even look at that like as God doing it, because if it was a natural disaster that caused it to happen, maybe it's God saying, okay, it's time for this thing to happen and this spark to move on.
Right. I think, if you think about how amazing it is that we were even born, when you think of the statistics and everything else.
400 trillion to one. 400 trillion to one. That's what Gary Vee says. And it's like, it's amazing that you exist. You won a lottery because you exist.
It's amazing that, we're on something spinning around in the middle of space. There's so many different things that it's very important for us to realize that the mistakes are part of the entire journey. Because, I've been very lucky to have been able to live in Italy, and I lived in Rome for a while. And if you go to some of the old churches, the floors are ancient mosaics. Some of those mosaics are hundreds and hundreds of years old. And when you look at
that, you get a sense of just standing there in history too. Like I love to do.
Oh yeah, for sure.
What are some of the, because you were talking about the mosaics, what are some of the ones that stand out to you?
Well, there's an amazing church called San Clemente in Rome, and it's actually it's basically a pagan hall is at the bottom level, but it's one thing built on top of another, and you can actually go down to the first BC and
Wow.
see the things that are down there. But the mosaic floor there is spectacular. It's so intricate, but when you look closely at the pieces, they were cut by hand. They're all imperfect. They're all
Right.
imperfect, but yet the picture is beautiful. And that's why I think it is so important for us to embrace imperfection, because it's part of the whole mosaic. Our life story is a mosaic. And so some days we're going to be at 100%. Some days we're going to be at 40%. Some days we're going to eat that Twinkie. It's okay, because we're learning from, if we take that point of view from the very beginning when we talked about limiting mindsets and growth mindsets, if we take the viewpoint that we are learning from whatever happens, and this is why journaling is so important, and being able to, they say you are the sum of the 5 people you spend the most time with. So if you're spending time with people that you could also share these things with, but in the end, what winds up happening is that when an event happens that's not according to your plan, if you're trying to stay in that perfection mindset, is to say, yeah, but I'm learning from that. I would have never known how to if.
Right. And what are some things that you've had to learn that, and I look back on my life and see that all the people that I've met is because I met this person or that person. I can kind of go through and say, I wouldn't have met this person if I didn't meet this person, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So it's all connected in some way. So was there a certain age that you were at when you realized that, or was it talking to a client when you started to put the pieces of your own life together and go, wow, this is all connected leading up to this point?
Well, the older we get, the more we could see it all fits together. But having grown up with an alcoholic father that was sometimes abusive, it wasn't until I was around 13 years old that I actually fought back for the first time. And that started to teach me about being in control of my life. And it taught me about resilience. It taught me about grit. It taught me about a lot of things. But when I was confronted with the situation with my wife, I wanted to control everything. I wanted to fix it. There was this, you don't want to lose the person you love, and you see the person you love is suffering. And so I had to learn, and it's a word we don't like, most people don't like, the idea of surrender. But I had to learn about surrender, meaning to let go of the end result and to learn to focus just on my efforts. When I was a child, the idea was to get away from my father, make as much money as possible, all those things. I was so focused on the end result. But in the caregiver role, I couldn't control that end result, because that was up to God for more than anybody else, right? The oncologist could have done whatever they needed to and everything else. So that's where I had to learn surrender. It's interesting because the memoir about my wife is being published in June, and I decided to title it "Chasing Life," because it was about.
I'd love to have you come back on and talk about that too, by the way.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
It's about the movement. It's about the movement of going forward, but focusing on life in the ordinary moments.
Right.
And not waiting for that retirement, not waiting for any of those things, you know?
Right. And somebody in the chat, they agree with what you said, that the imperfection is what makes us perfect. God loves us so much that we are made of his image and likeness, and that's weekend are big. And they've been friends with me for a while, and they usually are in here listening to the shows. But that's a good point, that the imperfection is what makes us perfect, because if God made us in his image, then the imperfections are part of what it is. And I've heard somebody say once that what if he knows what it's like for what he created in the first place.
Yeah. Well, you know, if I could circle back to the imperfection thing, because it's extremely important, because I do believe that we are here to learn who we are, and we are here to learn how we can leave a positive signature, let's say, on the world after we're gone. So we need to be imperfect to learn.
Right.
And so if you embrace the
if
belief,
you were perfect, it would be a boring life.
it would be a boring life. There would be nothing to learn, and you would have nothing to contribute. Just think about it. If we were all perfect, there would be nothing to contribute.
That one kind of blew my mind right there. If that went wrong, right? Everything that went wrong hadn't went the way it is, I probably wouldn't be here talking like I'm talking. I wouldn't do the donations that I do to the suicide hotline. I wouldn't do all that stuff, because if my life was perfect, I wouldn't have any reason to do any of it. So that's what I'm going to take from this one.
Good.
That's what that's my 5 minute right there.
If you were perfect, you wouldn't grow. If you were perfect, you wouldn't grow. Like, you know, people say sometimes, like, I've had a tough life, and I don't see it that way. If it wasn't for the journey with my father, I couldn't have been able to take care of my wife the way I did. If it wasn't for her journey, it wouldn't have led me to be a life coach. And if I didn't become a life coach, I wouldn't. I believe in a philosophy that all our life experiences have no value if we don't share them, if we don't put them into action.
Right.
And
that's where you get the possibility in action, right?
That's where I get the possibility in action. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. I was thinking of something when we were talking about, because you were talking about it's the when you achieve, like, getting a new car or whatever, it's a goal. And I was thinking a good acronym for goal would be get out and learn.
Wow, I like that a lot. Get out and learn. That is excellent.
So there's something for you to take.
Yeah, I'm a big acronym guy as well. If people read some of the articles I've written, you know, I recently wrote an article on loss, and I talk about that loss is really the lack of self and security.
Wow,
because at the end of any loss is a loss of our own identity, because we have to then become somebody new. We have to transform from what we lost, because that's no longer part of our identity. And the problem that a lot of people make, and I shouldn't say it's a problem, but it's very common that, let's say, I have a very good friend who is divorced, and she defines herself as the divorced woman. Now, the transformation that we're working on is that, no, I am the woman that overcame a divorce.
Right.
And that goes back to our original conversation about perspective and the way we talk to ourselves and limiting beliefs and all of that, because it's called the imposter syndrome, but it feels.
I talked a little bit about that, so go ahead and
okay. So, well, it feels inauthentic in a way to talk about ourselves in a positive way.
Yep.
And
yep.
And it's not to fake it until you make it. The thing is that we were born with a mind of choice. And so there's nothing wrong with making that choice to say, I am the person that overcame divorce. Personally, I am the person that transformed my life from losing my wife. And people ask me about it, and I say, you know what? I'm positively scarred. I'm a big Harry Potter fan, so I think of Harry Potter and the scar in his head
the little scar, yeah.
from his mother's love, and I say, I am beautifully scarred from loving my wife. Wow,
that's deep and beautiful. Just that little thing.
Yeah, it comes from deep within, right?
Right.
Because again, if we think about imperfect, right? And we think about the mosaic where the pieces were cut by hand back in the ancient times, our scars are part of the beauty. We do live in a society where, especially with Instagram, it's becoming more and more prevalent that we think everything is supposed to be amazing.
The comparison when you're talking
Jane
that
Fonda looks amazing for 90 years old. Jane Fonda does not look 90 years old, right?
Yeah.
Because of all the work she's had done. But there's a small town near where I live here in Italy that they only built a road in the 70s. So it was really an isolated town. And there are these 90-year-old women that look weathered, but there's a beauty in it. There's just such beauty because they lived. Yeah, it's a life story. And our brain, and the reason why I talking about to ourselves and everything else, our brain is like a supercomputer, but it doesn't have a filing system. You can't click on the file and something comes out.
That make life easier if it did, wouldn't it? Be like, I just got to run this diagnostic and I'm fine.
But it makes correlations, it makes relationships, and that comes from a story. So the way we've learned comes from stories we've told ourselves.
Right.
And it's just being able to change the narrative. And I've always liked that quote, that if you own your story, you get to write the ending, because the pen is then in your hand. And it's the whole idea.
I was gonna say a pen in your hand, and you can kind of go on with that, because I kind of want to know what brought you into life coaching in the first place, and so that's kind of your story.
Sure. It's interesting because I pursued finance because as a 13-year-old kid, what I believed was, okay, to get freedom, I needed money. And, I have a few years on me. So when I was 13, you could actually find a job. Your parents your mom had to sign a form, but you could go and you can work in a grocery store or something. And I started working, and the whole idea was about money. After I met my wife and we got married, I realized that the whole pursuit of my career was fueled by anger. And now here I was in this amazing, loving relationship, and I wanted the love to propel me. And we talked about me maybe going back to school. At that time, I didn't know what I wanted to do. She was doing her MD, PhD, but then she was diagnosed with late stage breast cancer at 31 years old. And that started an 11-year journey of taking care of her. It didn't make sense for me, of course, to change jobs, because my job paid me well to deal with certain things and gave me some freedoms. But after she passed away and I looked back on my life, I realized that the biggest
Oh man, freezing up in here. But I'm gonna refresher. Oh. Oh man, it froze. It froze up. Um, all right. Well, it looks like he froze up, or my computer dropped him out, or something. I don't know what happened. But he was excellent guest. I want to have him on again. Robert Pardi is his name. He's a life coach. Possibility in Action is his podcast. It's only 5 minutes. The link is in the description if you want to go take a listen to it. It's just a little 5-minute snippet of his podcast. I appreciate all you guys being here. Fantastic travels, weekend RVing. God answers prayers in the end. If his will is done, yet it is important to know and relinquish any control we have. And that's kind of what I took from it. And I wanted to say, I was gonna get to the point where it was, stop waiting for life to happen to make it happen. And if he started at 13 doing that and all that stuff, it is a beautiful, beautiful thing that he ended up being where he was being at. And if you guys want to go over and check him out and listen to him and all that, I've been having connection issues lately. And so I don't know if it was my connection that dropped him out, or if it was his connection that dropped him out, or what happened there, but he is an excellent guest. So I don't want him to think that I dropped him out or anything like that, because I didn't. I definitely wanted to talk to him a little bit further, but I'm going to have him on again. We'll talk about the memoir that he wrote for his wife. I think that'll be really good. And I just want to say, I'm thankful for all you guys being here. And I know we don't get to talk very often. I try to pop up stuff when it comes up, like when Weekend RVing said, oh, he popped back in here. So I don't know.
Yeah, you know what? That's
I don't know.
That's really weird. How is the connection now?
It's way better now. We're having a good connection now. So
okay, I'm using my my cell phone, which
that's what I have to use too, is my cell phone, because the Wi-Fi doesn't like to work. So
that's really weird, because but I've never done a live broadcast like this before, so maybe there's some interference.
There might be, but I was saying I didn't know what happened, and I didn't want you to think that I dropped you out or anything. I'm like, man, because we were having a good conversation, and I was just telling them, the people in the chat, that my saying is stop waiting for life to happen and make life happen. And you starting at 13 and then going through all this kind of stuff, you made life happen. And so what are some takeaways that you would tell people as far as kind of my saying goes, is if you're stuck and you feel like you're stuck, what are some ways to get out of feeling stuck?
Okay, so there are so many different practices or things to make you unstuck. I do think that, and it's been spoken about from everybody, this idea of gratitude, but it's not gratitude as, they talk about a gratitude journal, and I'm very grateful for my cup of coffee. I'm very grateful for the fresh air. Those are just bullet points that have no emotion behind them. So real gratitude comes from when you connect to the emotion of loss. When you think about what it would be like to not have that in your life anymore, that's true gratitude. And
Okay.
you need to connect to the emotion of how it makes you feel. So, for example, every morning I follow a practice where when I wake up in the morning, the first hour, I don't turn on my phone. I don't turn on my computer. I go for a little run. I sit on my balcony. I drink a cup of coffee. And so if I want to talk about the gratitude of that moment, it's a sunny day. And I'm so grateful for the sun and the coffee because it makes me feel relaxed or tranquil or whatever word we want to do. Because if I didn't have it, and what's really amazing, this little town, by the way, this little town I live in is where Madonna comes from, the singer.
Wow.
Yeah, it's also where my family comes from. So, and there's only 900 people, but there's an old house that they left as is when the woman passed away that you can go into. And she died in 1976. She only had one light bulb, no heat. She used to sleep with donkeys in her bedroom. She had no bathroom. She had one of those like a bedpan basically. And yet she had the option of changing all of that. The state,
and she was happy with what he had.
And she said, I'm happy with what I have. And so sometimes I go into that house just to reflect about how lucky we really are. But a lot of times we don't look at it that way because we're looking at the other things that we should have. I was in the States soon after becoming a life coach and having left my finance job, and I stayed with a friend of mine, and I had an apartment in Rome at that time because I was working in Rome, and his living room was bigger than my apartment in Rome. And I thought to myself, what have I done to my life? I could have had the big house. I should have followed the money. But I realized my idea of success had changed. And I had to turn back in and think about what I was grateful for. And that
always go back to being grateful.
Yeah. So if you're stuck, it's an easy practice, but connect to what that is. Like if you're saying that I'm so happy because it was a beautiful day.
Right.
Well, go deeper. How did it make you feel? And then think about if you didn't have that option anymore. If you didn't have, whatever the case is, right? And then all of a sudden you realize how important that is. Because what I want everyone to walk away from with this is life happens in the ordinary moments. And it really is true about this idea of, being present. And there's a cool quote I love, and it's a series of questions, and it says, what time is it now? Where are you? Here. Who are you? The present moment. And it comes from a book called The Peaceful Warrior. And I actually have that written in a journal. And it's like one of the front page of my journal, there's a couple of quotes. And that's one of them to remind me that, who am I? I am the present moment. I can't be my past, and I'm not my future. But we carry the past. We carry the past with us, believing that's who we are. But we're not. That's just us. Think about when you drive your car. You spend 95% of the time looking at the road in front of you and only 5% in the rear view mirror.
Right.
That's how we should be living life.
Yeah, that's exactly. You shouldn't look in the review mirror other than to be thankful, get the gratitude for what you've been through and be thankful for what you have, and then keep looking forward there you go.
Yeah.
There you go. And like I was saying, I want to have you back on and talk about your memoir that you're writing. I think that'll be a good conversation too, and talk about loss, because I've dealt with a lot of loss, and you've been a great guest. And stick around. I'm gonna play the credits, and like I said, stop waiting for life to happen and make life happen, guys. That's what it's all about.
That's what it's all about.
Now you know how to get out of being stuck. So that's what we all learned today. So I'm gonna play the credits, and just stick with me for a minute. We'll be right back.
Okay, Bob.